Well, I guess you could say I'm quite a fan of comics. This is Tyler the Dog Walker. Hey, Frank and Brian, it's Silent Ninja. Also, hey, everyone else watching. So I saw your dog walks video about your favorite comic book shop, Nuclear Comics. I thought I'd make this one about comic books since I'm, well, pretty interested in it. I've started reading comics, as far back as I can remember. Though lately, the comic books I'll be talking about is by a publisher called Valiant. Valiant is been around since the 90s. It's been going around one way or another. Though in 2012, they went through a big reboot and started rebooting all their lines with completely new stories and whatnot. And it's what I've been engrossed in since 2017, when I found out they made a web series starring Jason David Frank, the Green Power Ranger, called Ninjak vs. Valiant Universe. And since then, I've been purchasing volumes left and right. Pretty much every paycheck, I've gotten one. I thought I would just give you a little sampler of what I've been reading and what you can start with. Best thing is that all their characters are pretty diverse. It's not very cut and dry like Marvel and whatnot, where almost all the characters are the same. So let's get started. So first one is Exo Manowar. It's a more of a sci-fi based comic. Basically, it's about a man named Ulrich, who is a Visigoth from the Roman times, who gets abducted by aliens, escapes, and steals their fancy suit of power armor. And it's basically about his adventures in said power armor in the 21st century, because space-time is confusing. I really like it. It's basically like if you take a barbarian and give him a suit of power armor, and he gets into all sorts of shenanigans and whatnot. It's a great read. Definitely recommend it. Next one, I think you guys will really like, is Bloodshot. Bloodshot is a very interesting character. He's a very Punisher type character, but didn't lose his family and whatnot. Basically, he's a super soldier created by a program called Rising Spirit, which is their version of Weapon X. And basically, his blood is full of nanomachines that basically give him regenerative powers that would make Deadpool jealous, as well as his nanites allow him to access technology and whatnot, so he can hack into mainframes. You can pull up the internet to learn new things, like how to fight and how to use certain weapons and vehicles. And basically, his stories center around him trying to regain his memory, because his memories are all implanted basically to motivate him to do whatever mission Rising Spirit wants. And now that he's become self-aware, he wants to know what he is and get back at the people that have been controlling him with these false memories. Very good read. I really like it. Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger, played this character in the web series, and next year Sony's going to be putting out a movie with Vin Diesel playing him. Most people are not too sure. I'm excited to see what he can do, and I'm just excited to see him on the big screen. As you can see, this issue was signed by Jason David Frank. Another one I'd recommend is Harbinger. Harbinger is their version of the X-Men, but darker. Basically, in the Valiant universe, instead of mutants, there's these psychic-powered beings called psiots, and most of them have to have their powers activated, but a very rare few are born right off the bat with them. Basically, the main character here is Peter, who was born with his powers, and he's basically one of the most powerful psychics or psiots in the world. And basically, he gets trained by a man named Toyo Arata, who is kind of like Professor Xavier, with a little mix of Magneto. And basically, it's kind of like a good story of like X-Men and teenage rebellion against authority and whatnot. It's a great read. It can be pretty dark in certain areas, but I think it's really good. Another one I like to recommend is Ninjak. He was the star of the web series Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe. I love ninjas, so this drew me. It was one of the first Valiants I ever bought, next to Bloodshot. And basically, Ninjak is about basically this British ninja who goes on deadly missions for MI6 and whatnot. And basically, it's like if James Bond was a ninja. And he has all these cool gadgets, you know. He's able to always outsmart his enemies. He's a master of disguise, all sorts of cool stuff. So if you want like a spy thriller with ninjas, I recommend this one. Another one, if you're into even more sci-fi / Batman Beyond / Ghost in the Shell, then I recommend Rye. Rye takes place way into the future, so way past all these other comics, and basically this takes place in New Japan in 4000 AD, and Rye is basically New Japan's sole protector, and it's basically about the adventures he goes on. He looks a little like Bloodshot, but he can do all sorts of things. Has all these superhuman abilities, uses a sword, can teleport. It's awesome. If you want something Ghost in the Shell or Batman Beyond related, I recommend Rye. Though if you want something more in the mystical department, then I recommend Shadow Man. Basically, this one takes place in New Orleans. You got all the voodoo magic stuff, including this. Shadow Man is about a guy who has been possessed by a Loa, and it grants him all these mystical abilities and can allow him to reach this area called the Dead Side, which is a like underworld type thing where spirits live and all sorts of shit. And basically he's fighting all sorts of mystical monsters with his team. If you want something more mystical and you like New Orleans and you like voodoo and all that kind of mysticism, check out Shadow Man. If you want something a little more comedic, then there's Archer and Armstrong, which is basically your classic buddy cop duo where you have Archer, who is this young man who was raised in a Christian theme park cult. That's right, Christian theme park cult. And he has been raised to defeat what they believe is the devil, but the devil is Armstrong, who's actually this immortal man who just goes around drinking, partying, and reading poetry. And basically, once the two get to know each other, they go on really wacky, crazy adventures. And it's a very odd couple where Archer is always like this sort of the by-the-book serious one, and Armstrong just wants to drink, party, and do whatever he wants. And if you want something even more comedic and buddy copy, there's Quantum and Woody. This one is very hilarious. It's about two brothers who hate each other's guts. They're on opposite spectrums of morality and whatnot, and they both get superpowers off this science experiment gone wrong. And while you think, well, why are they still together? They have to be together because if they don't clang their wristbands every 24 hours, crazy stuff starts happening. So it's about these two people that are forced to work together, that are brothers, and they also have to go on wacky and crazy adventures fighting all sorts of supervillains, even though only one of them wants to be a superhero and the other is more of a con artist. And then one last thing I'd recommend, if you want to basically see what the entire Valiant universe is like, then there's The Valiant, which is a mini-series that features all these characters and then some, and it's basically just a journey where they have to try to stop this all-powerful being from happening. So yeah, these are all the comics I recommend starting on. Best thing about Valiant is that all their first volumes for the series are like $10, which is real cheap. And then after that, it's more of like, your usual graphic novel price. But the $10 basically starter fee is like well worth it because it lets you try new things. And basically all these comics I showed you are very different from one another. But also what I love about Valiant is that all these characters are extremely powerful in their own way. Like you could have each of these characters go up against each other and they could easily defeat each other, and it kind of shows. Like you wouldn't think a ninja would be able to take on a guy with like near invincible power armor, but they actually show it, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, that's my title on the Dog Walker. I love Valiant Comics. I haven't been really reading Marvel and DC lately, just because I feel like their platform has changed to what I used to read. And I feel like with Valiant, it's just this new universe I can get into. And it's not convoluted or anything. Like, these characters do cross over from one another, but it's not overdone like Marvel and DC would do. It's very close and compact. And you don't even have to read all of these to get the whole story. You can just read one and just keep on going. If you don't like one, then you don't have to read it. But if you do love one, you can keep reading more and read series that intertwine with one another. But yeah, that's my title on the Dog Walker. This is title on the Ninja. You know, love talking about comics. Got any comic questions? Let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to answer to them. All right, peace.